Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I sought this debate on transport in Tees Valley to voice my concerns about how the discussion is developing in terms of the need for greater investment in our transport infrastructure and the need for us to rebalance our economy, both in geographical terms and in terms of a greater focus on our manufacturing industries. By way of introduction, Tees Valley might be more than 200 miles away from Westminster, but that's no excuse for the concerns of our region being as far away from the considerations of Downing Street and Whitehall as they are at present. Last year, I asked the Prime Minister about the huge disparity in spending on transport infrastructure between the North East and the South East and how the needs of the Tees Valley were being neglected. In the Prime Minister's response, he talked about the Tyne and Wear Metro, the Tyne crossing and the A1 between Newcastle and Gateshead, but not a single word about Tees Valley. Hopefully I might better fix the location of Tees Valley in the government's collective memory this evening. Much attention has been paid recently, and quite rightly so, to the One North initiative of our great northern core cities of Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield and Newcastle, and to the Transport for the North announcement of just a few weeks ago involving the same players. And of course the Chancellor has talked of an HS3 rail link between Manchester and Leeds. All of this has been set against the backdrop of the Northern Powerhouse. Madam Deputy Speaker, all of that's to be welcome, but what I want to do in this debate is explore the current limitations being placed on the discussions and whether these are matters that should be the sole prevail of the self-named core cities. And I will also want to dispel the myth perpetuated by some that the north ceases at the M62. There is a great deal more to the north than that, and I submit that if we are to truly talk of a northern powerhouse and the interconnectivity of our economic engine rooms, then it's essential to consider all of the north, and in doing so, it's imperative that the role of Tees Valley should be properly considered. I'd like to concentrate in the main on rail infrastructure, and as such it's telling that modern Middlesbrough came into being as a direct result of the creation of the railways and of the founding of the Stockton and Darlington Railway Company to serve as the river access point for receiving coal from the Durham coalfields on the bank of the River Tees for onward shipping. Middlesbrough was subsequently propelled into the Industrial Revolution by the siting of the explosive iron and steel industry and was described by Gladstone as the infant Hercules, and soon became the fastest growing town in European history. But despite that railway heritage, Middlesbrough, which is now at the heart of a conurbation of some 660,000 people, is the largest conurbation in the UK without a direct service to the capital. There are far too many aspects of the economic powerhouse of Tees Valley for me to cover in the time available, but the sub-regional transport needs have to be seen in the context of its industrial and commercial might, which is... I wouldn't do.
For giving way, and I congratulate him on securing this debate, which is quite crucial to Tees side and the wider Tees area. I appreciate him concentrating on rail, but the Tees Valley LEP actually reminded us today that we've no major road network, and we're forced to rely on secondary roads like the A19 and the A66, impacting on our ability to attract jobs. Does he agree with me that as well as direct rail routes to London with electrification on the lines as well, we actually need 21st century roads, including another crossing over the River Tees, if we're actually going to serve Teesside properly?
I wholeheartedly agree with my honourable friend. He's absolutely right. I mean, one glance at the road map atlas will show the complete absence of blue roads. They're called motorways, and I think we need one or two of them in our region. But if I can return to now our industrial might, because that's a key component of the northeast of England's manufacturing prowess, and it's a region which is, London apart, the only one in the UK which consistently makes a positive contribution to our balance of payments, and we lead the way in advanced manufacturing and export-led growth. Tees Valley's integrated chemical complex at Wilton, Billingham and Seal Sands is the biggest in the UK and the second largest in Europe, and sits alongside the steel industry, two vital foundation industries side by side. The Tees Valley economy contributes significantly to the north, some £11.5 billion of GVA to the national economy every year. We have a thriving digital and creative industries cluster, which grew faster than in any other LEP area in 2014. We have 280,000 strong, highly skilled workforce and a small business base of over 14,500 firms. We also have the UK's third largest port, Teesport, which provides an international gateway distributing products across the country and abroad. And as a contemporary sign of the vitality and importance, PD Ports have just signed a 7-year contract with SSI for the continued shipping of the steel products. Our leading colleges, our universities and national knowledge centres are at the forefront of skills development and innovation. And Tees Valley has an international airport, albeit one that needs investment and redevelopment, and we look to Peel airports to better develop the airport services, and we have direct road and rail routes to key locations across the north. There is a consensus around the importance of reducing the UK's trade deficit and rebalancing the economy. If this is to be achieved, it's important that Tees Valley and its mighty industries play their full role. And there are exciting developments in the energy-intensive industries which hold great potential for our region and our country. Strictly subject to the science being right and there being verifiable safeguards, hydraulic fracturing and coal gasification have enormous potential for our future energy industrial requirements. There isn't time to go this evening into the detail, but subject to those safeguards, the future could be truly exciting. The major beneficiaries from the syngas so derived are the energy-intensive industries, and none more so than those on Teesside. I must mention, however, the Teesside Collective, a pioneering infrastructure project which is comprised of a cluster of leading industrial players of BOC, Lotte Chemical UK, SSI and Growhow, who offer a compelling opportunity for the UK to progress its industrial and environmental interests at the same time. Work is already underway for the development of a business case for deploying industrial CCS in the Teesside cluster, which will be completed later this year. Tees Valley is in the right place at the right time to become the industrial carbon capture storage leader in Europe. It's therefore essential that government provides the necessary support such key foundation industries need, which in turn will allow our manufacturing industries to compete on a global stage. Good rail and road infrastructure for freight and passengers is essential to all of this. On the 17th of January just past, the Secretary of State for Transport attended the launch in Leeds of Transport for the North, a body of regional leaders tasked with drawing up and delivering a comprehensive programme of strategic investments to transform the North infrastructure and help maximise growth. Again, I would argue that if that particular body is to properly speak as to the transport needs of the North, then it is wholly inappropriate that Tees Valley does not sit alongside the 5 cities on the board. I will...
For giving way and congratulate him on securing what is a very important debate. I think across the House we can all agree that it is in the interests of the areas we represent to talk up Teesside, some of the great things it's doing. Steel making is back, train making is coming, investment is coming in. This is a very important and cross-party point. Tees Valley Elect needs to be represented as those other bodies are to give our area the strong voice that it needs. And I wanted to voice my support and make it very clear that this is something I think that unites MPs from different parties and council leaders, council groups in support of it, because we need to ensure our voice is strong and heard.
Well, I thank the honourable member for that intervention. I think we are speaking with one voice for Tees Valley, and I'm grateful to him for his support. Quite simply, the Tees Valley transport infrastructure, opposite the existing and future needs of businesses and communities, is lacking in key areas, and those deficits need to be addressed if we're to capitalise on the terrific potential of our region. Undoubtedly, Tees Valley isn't configured like the self-styled core cities, but it has its own unique configuration and status, which warrants a seat at the table. The Minister will be aware of the excellent inclusive outcomes that have been achieved in the governance arrangements for Rail North, and I hope he'll agree with me that it would be entirely sensible to take that sort of inclusive approach in terms of the Board of Transport for the North. I would urge the Minister to take the necessary steps to ensure that Tees Valley has a seat. Whilst it's regrettable that the state cannot currently compete alongside private companies for rail franchises, putting that argument to one side for another day, I'm nevertheless pleased that on the awarding of the new franchise, the business case has been won for the reintroduction of a direct Middlesbrough to London rail service, so I need not repeat it, and clearly the economic growth that this will deliver is unarguable. The disappointment is that the service will only come into being in 5 years' time in 2020. I wish to place on record, Mr Speaker, my thanks to the Minister, the Member for Devizes, for meeting with me to discuss this matter last week. I would like to think that she was persuaded by the veracity of the case for accelerating the start of the service. I do hope that Virgin East Coast can find ways and seize whatever opportunities present to bring forward the start date of the service. Turning to a matter that concerns Network Rail, just over a year ago the main entrance to Middlesbrough station was closed because of structural difficulties with the Victorian cloister buildings that sit underneath the station main car park. This means there's now no vehicular or indeed pedestrian access to the station from the main southerly aspect because of the inherent dangers. A year on, plans are now being progressed to board up the frontage, install signage and prepare alternative parking arrangements, whilst architects and engineers go about preparing plans for reconstruction and development. All well and good, Madam Deputy Speaker, but this is simply far too slow. The people of Middlesbrough deserve better than this. They pay their taxes, unlike some HSBC super wealthy customers. I can only look on with envy at the £895 million redevelopment of Reading Station. It looks fantastic and entirely fit for purpose in the modern railway age. However, back in Middlesbrough, progress is painfully slow, but the townspeople are incredibly patient. They've had practice. Indeed, whilst Dresden, Frankfurt and Berlin were all rebuilt in the aftermath of the Second World War, Middlesbrough railway station's beautiful glass and steel domed roof was destroyed by the bombs dropped by the Luftwaffe in 1942, and we're still waiting for it to be put back. And I would urge the Minister, in turn, to press home the need with Network Rail for much greater urgency, and I plead for better communication. It surely cannot be too much to ask for there to be a dedicated website to explain directly to the public what the problem is, what they're doing about it, and how long it will all take to put right. Turning to Darlington Railway Station, which is the sub-region's East Coast mainline hub, there are significant encumbrances there, but the resolution of which will facilitate significant development opportunities. I'm confident my honourable friend, the member for Darlington, will not mind me trespassing, but the entrapment of the local west-east line out of Darlington Station between the north and southbound lines of the East Coast cause immense difficulties both in terms of managing the competing traffic demands, but it's also a source of congestion and delay for the East Coast service itself. The accepted solution is to move the local line from its current configuration and relocate it free of the mainline crossover. Not only will that both improve a local and long-haul services, it will free up a major commercial developmental opportunity within the station itself. All of that was brought into stark reality for me just 2 weeks ago when changing trains from the King's Cross Darlington train for the Darlington Middlesbrough train. The local train was, of course, a pacer train, perhaps one of the worst in the fleet with the metal frame bus seats. There was a problem with the points and there were no trains in or out of Darlington for over an hour. And on a bitterly cold evening, the choice for the passengers was to step out onto the freezing platform or sit and wait in their seats and suffer the dreadful poisonous diesel fumes coming into the carriages. To think that these are our travelling conditions some 200 years after George Stephenson created the first passenger railway in the very town of Darlington simply beggars belief. My plea to the Minister is that we get rid of these cattle trucks as quickly as possible and replace them with some decent forms of transportation. David Higgins, the CEO of HS2 himself, has said that if the good people of the south of England were asked to tolerate such appalling rolling stock, there would be riots. The time for change is long past. I know the Secretary of State has been pressed on this, but they need to go and go quickly. With over 70% of major local businesses internationally owned, we remain globally competitive by offering effective transport links and resilient infrastructure. Undoubtedly, rail connectivity needs to be improved and electrification across the north of England is crucial to this objective. Whilst the franchises for TransPennine and Northern are yet to be awarded, it's absolutely essential for the vitality of Tees Valley and indeed the entire northern region, the UK as a whole, that good and direct links are preserved and developed right across the north to include direct services from Middlesbrough to Leeds, Manchester and Liverpool. The argument for electrification has long since been won, and I won't recite the environmental and economic justifications, but the benefits to Tees Valley would be enormous. Much is said about the interconnectivity of our core cities, and rightly so, and we have to address that issue, but the same principle applies in terms of the interconnectivity within regions such as the North East and sub-regions such as Tees Valley. It currently takes up to 1 hour and 36 minutes to travel between Middlesbrough on the Tees and Newcastle on the Tyne, a road distance of 40 miles between the two major conurbations. 53 minutes from Saltburn to Darlington by way of a bone-shaking pacer. That has no part in a modern-day transport system in one of the richest countries on the planet. Mo Farah would give it a good run for its money. I know that Electrification Task Force will report imminently, but I trust that the Minister will agree with me that the case has been more than made that electrification from the East Coast main line from Northallerton through to Teesport is a top priority. The concept of the Tees Valley Metro has been on the stocks for some considerable time, but only electrification of the existing sub-regional network could make it feasible. A light rail or tram system would be transformational for Tees Valley. Turning briefly to buses, I think what sums up the way in which bus services are currently delivered is encapsulated in the stories I hear when I speak to Avanta, who are charged with delivering the work programme. They tell me that far too often they can source entry-level work at places like Teesport and elsewhere across Tees Valley, only for it to prove impossible for the client to physically travel to such places of work at the times that the businesses need them or for them to get home again. Quite frankly, we don't have a public transport system worthy of the name. My constituents in places like Berwick Hills and Middlesbrough tell me of the lack of buses to get to the hospital. And in my view, it's essential that when powers are devolved to combined authorities, that they include the re-regulation of buses as benefits London and making it mandatory for there to be comprehensive transport coverage for accessing health services and other key destinations. A truly integrated transport system must be where buses and road and rail services coalesce around the needs of our businesses and communities.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He makes an excellent point about the bus service which goes through Park End also, and this follows the recent news from the closure of the medical clinic in Park End, which also served his constituents in Berwick Hills, which shows that not only are primary healthcare services being cut there, but access to secondary healthcare services are being reduced as a result of bus service terminations.
Well, my old friend makes a very, very good point, because people simply need to be able to get to the hospital when they're ill or the visiting relatives, and they need to be able to get to work on time when the businesses need them then and home again. And almost finally, I will briefly mention roads, Madam Deputy Speaker, which does warrant an entire debate of its own. But as my honourable friend from Stockton has said, what is crying out in the Tees Valley is the need for an additional road crossing of the Tees. A number of plans have been prepared over the years, and I would urge the Minister to have his officials consider them. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, Tees Valley has a very proud history of major contribution to the economic vitality of this country. And not only does it continue to do so, the capacity for even greater achievements is immense. But that vast potential can only be realised if the government understands, recognises and responds in the appropriate terms. And in addition, I ask that the core cities realise that the Northern Powerhouse story is not just about creating a London of the North, but building interconnected communities and economies that provide inclusive prosperity for all.
Ian Wright. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable friend from Middlesbrough for giving up some of his time to allow me to make a number of very brief points. I agree fully with the points he's raised about the governance of the Transport Board, which penalises, excludes and isolates our region from the rest of Northern transport policy and procedures. I also agree with him fully on proper investment in our rolling stock, meaning that pacer trains that he referred to, unacceptable and unused as they are in the rest of the country, should be considered unacceptable and unusable in Middlesbrough, Hartlepool and on to Newcastle as well. But in my contribution, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to concentrate on the inadequacy of our bus service, as I have done on many occasions in this House. Only, as my honourable friend has said, only re-regulation will provide a coordinated, proper bus service for our region. I have had in the past week correspondence from the principal of Hartlepool College, who states that inadequate transport provision means that potential students from Teesside, North Yorkshire and South Durham are not able to get nor can afford to go to Hartlepool College in the first place. Apprentices aged 16 or 17 from Hartlepool may not be able to get to those opportunities in Wilton or elsewhere. So my point is this, Madam Deputy Speaker, ensuring that the transport system, particularly the bus network, matches the routes of learning and to employment, as well as making sure that we can avoid social exclusion, is crucial, and at the moment on Teesside doesn't happen. So I ask this of the Minister: what will he do to ensure that we're able to provide a cheap, reliable and coordinated bus and transport network across Teesside to ensure that people in our area have the opportunity to achieve their potential and make sure that people, populations and industrial potential are matched together?
Minister, John.
I'm grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the honourable gentleman introduced the debate on which I congratulate him, he reminded me, as I'm sure he must have reminded you, of Hegel. It was Hegel who said that nothing great in this world has ever been accomplished without passion. And his passionate advocacy of the interests of his constituents and indeed of Teesside more generally has certainly made an impression on me and I'm sure on other members of the House. Now, I don't disregard the significance of Teesside, and I could hardly do so, given that his honourable friend, the member of the Hartlepool, also contributed to this debate when I was a Minister at the Department for Business, brought a group of businessmen from the Tees Valley who themselves illustrated, indeed personified, the very range of innovative industries that he's described tonight. I'm well aware of the character of the innovation that's taking place there and of the need to provide the right kind of transport infrastructure to support it. Now, I have a very long and impressive speech, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I won't have time to deliver it in the short time available to me. I know it's a disappointment to you and the whole House. But what I will commit to do is what I cannot cover, I will include in a letter which I will send to those honourable members that have contributed to this evening's proceedings. I do want, however, to deal with some of the very specific points the honourable gentleman's raised. We do, as I say, recognise that effective transport plays a key role in facilitating growth across the country, in creating a more balanced economy, in connecting communities and enabling people to access jobs, services and leisure in the way that was described in the contributions we've already heard. That's why we have determined to reverse the effects of some of the neglect in respect of infrastructural development that has characterised previous regimes, and I'm not going to be more partisan than that, you'll be pleased to know, but I felt I ought to make that point at the outset. I know, for example, the honourable gentleman will recognise and I hope acknowledge the importance of the road investment strategy that we put in place. This is a long-term funded commitment to looking at the national road network in an innovative way, based on empirical analysis of the benefits that we get from the money we spend. It does secure both plans and money through to 2021. It is a 15 billion investment, probably the biggest road investment programme since the 1970s, and the North will benefit from it, including the North East, as he will know. He mentioned the Tees Valley in respect to logistics and bioindustries, creative industries and so on, and I'm aware that that connectivity that he described is vitally important. A major new scheme will be taken forward at A19. This has been something which my honourable friend, Member Stockton South, has campaigned for some time, and I was pleased to see his neighbour in Stockton North joining his campaign to make those improvements. The major new scheme will be taken forward on the A19, the Norton to Wynyard schemes, together with two previously announced schemes on Tyneside, the A19 Coast Road and the A19 Testos, will raise the A19 expressway standard from Yorkshire to the north of Newcastle. The widening of the A19 at Billingham Bypass in Teesside to 3 lanes between the A139 and the A689 will also include replacement of the concrete surface with no low noise surfacing. These investments will complement the high agency pinch point schemes already underway at 2 key junctions on the A19 and will smooth the way along the entire route, delivering more reliable journey times and reducing congestion and pollution. I will happily give way to the honourable gentleman.
Giving way, you know, when you travel from the junction at Norton, where I live, on the A19 at 8:30 in the morning, you just join the queue for the next half hour. The real question is, can we actually look forward to a second crossing or another crossing over the River Tees within the next programme that the government actually plans?
I might suggest to the honourable gentleman that he applies for an adjournment debate on just that matter, and then we can explore it in the depth that it deserves. And I'd be delighted to respond to it as the Minister responsible. The road investment plan also reflects the conclusion of the 6 feasibility studies announced in June 2013, which examined the case for improvements on the A1 and other national corridors. But in the time available to me, I want to depart from this pre-prepared script and deal specifically with some of the points the honourable gentleman made and hopefully give him good news. Because I share his view, actually, about the work on the Victorian cloisters at Middlesbrough Station. I will ensure that we pursue Network Rail to make sure that matter is dealt with speedily. I actually would go further than that. I want to have a look at this roof that he described in 1942. I wonder if we might look at the feasibility of doing something on that in the longer term as well. I think he's right that a seat at the table in Transport for the North for his area would be appropriate. I think he makes a persuasive case. That was something I need to take up with the Secretary of State, but I know the Secretary of State is sympathetic to that case, and I think we should move ahead with that with some speed. I think he's right about direct services to Middlesbrough, and as soon as the improvements, which this government is making, by the way, to the East Coast main line, which I enjoy the privilege of travelling on very frequently, are in place, I don't see why we shouldn't consider those further improved services. I won't, because I'm so short of time. Forgive me. I think he makes a persuasive case about rolling stock, and I'm very happy to look at that too. Clearly, and again, he will appreciate these are matters that need to be considered in the round, but I think he's right that people deserve the chance to travel on trains that are fit for purpose. Do you know, generosity's taken hold of me. I will go away to something else.
Grateful to the Minister. There's just a point if I would ask him to raise with his Treasury colleagues the aspect around air passenger duty, which is obviously an issue for Durham Tees Valley Airport and the other airport in the North East, as far as it being devolved to Edinburgh. And it would be of great benefit if the government would look at what we can actually do on air passenger duty to ensure that there's no loss to the regional airports in the North East of England.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the breadth of my grasp and the length of my vision knows few bounds, but we haven't time to explore that in detail this evening. Now, on the issue of buses, the Honourable Gentleman made an important contribution on that subject too, and he will know that bus travel is something dear to my heart. He made an interesting argument that when it comes to accessing health services, and particularly hospitals, he regarded it as unacceptable that there wasn't adequate public transport available. I, again, frankly, share that view. I have a similar case in my own constituency at the hospital there, the new Johnson Hospital, where the bus services have been restricted, and I'm fighting a similar campaign to the one he is in his own constituency. I think it is something we should look closely at. It does seem to be important that particularly the sick and vulnerable should be able to get to those services readily and easily and affordably, and the people that care for them too. It's not just the patients, is it, Madam Deputy Speaker? It's the people who are related to them, who want to visit them, and so on. So those are all areas where I think we can make progress, and we can do so on the basis that he's brought these matters to the attention of the House this evening. He will know that we can only do so because this government has created an economic turnaround. Through our long-term economic plan, we are creating sufficient resource to be able to look at all these matters, were it not for the determination shown by the government, not only to think strategically about transport in respect of rail and buses and road in the ways that I've outlined, but also that determination to do so on the basis of a credible, national, long-term economic plan. None of what he's asked for, or I hope reasonably, moderately, in a measured, non-partisan way have agreed would be possible.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order!